All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session on the Apex Metadata API. My name is Aaron. I'm the product manager for this product, and with us today is Avram.
Hi, all.
He's the lead engineer, and he drove the design and architecture of this, and is probably better known among many of you as the inventor of custom metadata types. All right, so forward-looking statement: any and all purchasing and investment decisions should be based on what's currently available in the product today. And with that, we'll get started. So this grew out of an idea that was posted in IdeaExchange by Andy Fawcett a few years ago, and was kind of backed up by a workaround for this that he put in GitHub. And it got a lot of traction pretty quickly. 7,000 points is a huge number of points for a developer-oriented feature. And so we picked this up and started development early in the year and got it out this spring. And have been excited to see the uptake. This is driven by three primary use cases: the ability to access metadata directly in Apex. The first one is to build custom setup UIs. Many enterprise apps and ISV apps, they're of course doing things that are very different than our CRM, and that the Salesforce setup doesn't take into account because we can't anticipate what those apps are going to do. So giving ISVs the ability to build custom setup UIs is one of the main motivators of this, and also likewise enterprise IT departments to be able to build setup widgets for the admins so that they can extend apps that get built by the IT department. The second main use case for this is around upgrades. Package upgrades oftentimes have some manual steps that have to be performed after the package gets upgraded, and the ability to access metadata directly in Apex allows developers to automate more of those steps. And the final use case is for auto configuration, where developers want to build an app that can, once it gets installed, it can take a look at the subscriber org, see how it's configured, and then make make decisions about how it's going to configure itself based on that. So in the demo, we're going to give you a look at the two main use cases there: the setup UI and the upgrade. But before we do that, I want to talk about what is in the Apex Metadata API and what is not in it. So we know that developers want us to expose the entire metadata API in Apex. We're going to move in that direction. We will probably never expose the entire API. We don't want people to be able to write code that in turn is writing code. It makes it very difficult for us in our security reviews to figure out what the app is going to do. So the ability to create Apex classes and Lightning components probably will not get supported, but we're certainly going to move well beyond the two metadata types we have supported now. These are the first two we went to market with because they were in the highest demand. And we'll talk a little bit later about where we intend to go from here. But Avram is going to give you a demo that's going to show the use case for these two types.
Thanks, Aaron. Let me just move us to... OK. So in this organization, we've installed an application that helps people manage their natural parks. And this comes with a custom metadata type called park configuration. And it also comes, as you can see, because of the little install arrow, with a default park configuration. But we want to give people the ability to create their own park configurations, separate from the default one that it comes with. And of course, they could do it by clicking the New button here and using the layout-based custom metadata record creator that comes with the product. But this developer's been very nice and wants to make that experience a little bit more guided and smoother. So they've actually created in their application a wizard to set up people's parks. And this wizard, let's say we're going to allow camping in our park, and we're going to allow RVs and provide water, but no electricity, unfortunately. We don't have access to that. This park is in bear country. And you have to watch out in this park for the grizzly bears in particular. But fortunately, we've got another bear that will help us out a little bit. We've got a trailblazing bear named Cody. And Cody is going to help us navigate the park and steer clear of those grizzly bears. We're going to just take the defaults for the hours of operation, and we're going to click Done. the wizard is done, and I've actually got this set up so that it forwards you to the deployment status page, which shows that, in fact, this deployment has already succeeded. And if we go back here to our custom metadata type, and we manage the records, you can see it created that new custom metadata record. All that involved no callouts, directly in Apex code. Now, something else we've got in this application is it provides cabins, a way to add cabins to your park. This is a regular old custom object, and it's got a very simple UI based on the cabin layout. And as you can see, this object has a single custom field called number of rooms. Now, the developer of this application has added in a second version another custom field called, which we're going to call spiffiness. It's going to measure the spiffiness of our cabins. And they want to add it to this layout. And they, in fact, do add it to the layout in their second version. And they upload the second version. Does anyone here know, though, what happens when you add a custom field to an already released layout? I want to see if I can hear if anyone says. It doesn't show up. It shows up for organizations that install the new version of the package as their first version. But it doesn't show up on upgrades because layouts, we don't know what customizations the subscriber may have already made. We don't want to clobber those. So we don't automatically do that. But with the Metadata Apex API, the developer can have that happen. And I am going to do this right now by going, whoops, to my second installation page. This is upgrading version 1 to version 2. I'm an admin, so we're just going to go ahead and install for admins only. Everyone having a good Dreamforce? Waiting on that package. It's doing its work. Oh, good. Upgrade completed. We're done. And now, let's go back to our app one more time. And let's go to cabins. And when we create a new cabin, what's that? It's a new field added to the layout directly by the install script. And before I show you a little bit about how this developer org did that, I want to show you a little bit about how the subscriber org can track what the package is doing. So we're going to go back into setup here. And I'm going to search for the setup audit trail. And I want you to see a couple of things about this setup audit trail. The first is, let's see, that here, this is me, and I used the wizard to create the new part configuration called new part config. And it has me as doing it, because I was the one using the wizard, but it also tracks the namespace of the source that caused that to happen. So the user can see, this is the namespace of that park package. It was actually park package code that on my behalf created that. Now, the layout was actually, it wasn't even directly added by me. It was added by the park manager install script. So there we can actually see that the change to the cabin page layout was done by that package source on behalf directly of the package itself, that park manager package. Okay, let's quickly flip over, because I've got the developer organization stuff up in VS Code, and take a little look at how this did it. And this is the controller for that wizard. Uses remoting Visualforce actions. And this controller, when the user clicks finish, it invokes this action. It basically gets the config object from the client, and it calls this create container method to create a class that's in a standard namespace, metadata.deploy container. And for those of you who are familiar with the Metadata API, deploy container is a little bit like your package XML file. It's where you put all of your metadata. It's a little bit, you can think of it like your package zip, too. It's where you put all the metadata for deployment. And here we have another class called custom metadata, which looks just like the custom metadata component in the Metadata API, except it's an Apex class. We can set its full name. We can set its custom fields from that config object in the controller. And finally, when we're done with all of that, and we return it back here, we enqueue a deployment, which means basically we tell Salesforce, OK, when this transaction gets committed, I want you guys to put a deployment in the queue and deploy this metadata container that I've set up right now. The modification to the layout was actually pretty similar. Here it implements install handler because it's a post-install script. And what we do is we load an existing layout, that cabin layout. We make some modifications. We find its info section, which I've got written down farther. We add that new custom field to the section. And we go ahead and we put that deployment in the queue again. And that will, as soon as the package install is done, we'll set up that deployment to modify the layout as well. And I think now I'm going to hand things back to Aaron.
All right, great. Thank you, Avram.
Get you back to your presentation.
So that obviously was a very simple demo, a very simple setup UI, but it's anything that gets a bit more complicated than that pretty quickly can involve a lot of metadata changes on the back end, where you would need to go in and add records to different custom metadata types, have them look up to perhaps some custom objects and custom fields, and being able to build a setup UI that will allow an admin to make a few changes and then drive a whole bunch of metadata changes on the back end is going to make life a lot easier for admins. It's going to allow them to do things much more on their own and rely less on professional services and their developer organization. So there's some subtleties or some additional things that we want to dig into here that you should understand about how this works. The first is that the deployment, even though it's being done by Apex, that's in this case in a managed package, the deployment is done on behalf of the subscriber org. That may seem a little bit counterintuitive at first, but it's consistent with how Salesforce works. If I'm an admin and I take the account object and I want to put a custom field on the object, the account object itself it belongs to Salesforce or is a part of the Salesforce metadata, but that custom field is in my own namespace, even though I'm setting it up through a Salesforce UI. So this would be the same thing. An admin is going to use this UI, and the metadata record that was created with this was in the namespace of the subscriber org. Now, there's two exceptions to this rule. One is that, as Avram showed you, the setup audit trail shows the namespace that initiated this metadata change or this metadata deploy. And the other exception is protected metadata. A subscriber org can't see protected metadata in a managed package naturally, but the code that's in the same namespace can see that protected metadata and can modify it. So those are a couple of exceptions to the general rule of if the deployment is happening essentially as a subscriber, if you're writing your code and you're trying to figure out what can I do and what can I not do with the Apex Metadata API in a customer's org, basically put yourself in the shoes of an admin or a developer in the subscriber org and ask what you can do and what you can't do, and that'll generally give you the right answer with these two noted exceptions. One of the things that we've done for security is to make sure that only trusted apps can make metadata changes through Apex. And by trusted apps, we consider the unmanaged package in the bottom row there to be trusted because in the subscriber org, you can inspect the code and you can make sure it's doing what you want it to do. And the certified package in the top row there is something that Salesforce has been able to inspect the code, and we also have a relationship with the vendor, so if anything were to go wrong, we know how to get a hold of the developer. The ones that are potentially not trusted are the uncertified managed package, because unless you built it yourself, you really have no idea what's inside that package, and it shouldn't. By default, we prohibit it from making changes to the metadata in the subscriber org. That default can be overridden. There are cases where you want that unmanaged package to the uncertified managed package to make metadata changes if you built it yourself. If you're an ISV and your package hasn't yet been certified, you of course want to test it, so you need to override this default. And if you are an enterprise and you're managing your apps through managed packages in your org or across multiple orgs, you're also going to want to override this default. So that is one of several security features we put in place for the Apex Metadata API. We are only allowing what we consider safe metadata types, and that's what I mentioned earlier, that we won't allow you to basically create and update Apex classes, Lightning components, things that have code in it. The setup audit trail tracks the namespace. The trusted app slide we just took a look at, and the last piece of the security features around this are that ISV apps, if they have the capability to make changes to the metadata in the subscriber org through this tool, the ISV is required to alert the subscriber of this. And this is not enforced programmatically; it's enforced by policy in our security review. So an ISV would need to put a description in the make a note in the description field for their app. So who can use this? Basically, anybody, if you are an ISV, anybody who can install your package can use whatever you've built that uses the Apex Metadata API. Professional and group editions cannot author their own Apex. They cannot use the Metadata API on their own accord, but they can install ISV packages, and they can run Apex that's written in that ISV package. And we also then make sure that those orgs can execute code that uses the Apex Metadata API that's in an ISV package. One thing, if you're using this for custom metadata records, to keep in mind, and this ties back into the fact that the deployment is being done on behalf of the subscriber org. If in Avram's demo, his UI created a new record of the custom metadata type. He could have, if he wanted to, modified the existing record, and depending on your use case, you can go either way. We do one way for ISVs to be able to preserve defaults and let the customer roll back to it is to keep the record that's packaged and create a new one rather than modifying it. But you can go whichever way you want with it. But we've seen some developers get tripped up because they've intended to modify the record in their metadata type and ended up creating a new one in the subscriber namespace. So if you need to modify a record in your namespace, you need to make sure that both the type and the record are fully qualified with the namespace, as you see on the bottom. And if you only qualify the type and not the record, it's going to create a record in the subscriber's namespace. So the benefits of the Apex Metadata API, the stuff we saw on the left was pretty apparent in Avram's demo, that it's much faster and easier to get apps set up. In the right-hand column, being able to create simple UIs that do a lot of complex things on the back end means the apps that you build, either as an ISV or in an IT department and building widgets for your admin, means the app can continue to be configured and extended and modified by admins without them having to rely on some of their developers. For ISVs, we've already seen this increase adoption. If you have a trial of your app and it requires some configuration to get going, and your customer or your prospect isn't sure they even want the app, this more simple the setup process is for them to try it, the more likely they are to try it, of course, and to convert and become customers. The ISVs will also have the ability to hide more of their configuration data. Previously, there was no way at all to modify custom metadata records that were hidden in the subscriber org outside of a package upgrade. And now that you can do it in code, any of the fields that are subscriber controlled can be modified by logic in your app by a UI and still keep the metadata itself protected. And finally, if anybody is using the Metadata API wrapper that I mentioned earlier in the presentation that Andy Fawcett built, or something similar to that, you know that there's hundreds of thousands of lines of code in there to do a Metadata API callout. Being able to access metadata directly without doing that metadata callout means, of course, you're going to have much simpler code. So everything on the left you saw in the demo that Avram just gave. The stuff on the right, where we're intending to go with this is on the framework level, we want to give you the ability to track the status of the deploy. Currently, you can get a callback, but you can't pull for the status, and this will help you to build UIs that will refresh themselves after the deploy has been done. And then the main thing we're intending to do is just to add more and more types, support more types of metadata in this. The next ones on the list are the custom objects, custom fields, and pick list values. And after that, we really want to hear from you what you consider to be the highest priority types of metadata. We know we've got a list that we've got from a number of developers already, but we really like you to go into the Trailblazer community, join the group, let us know what types of metadata you want supported. Be as detailed as you can about the use cases. That'll help us give us better data for prioritization. And then finally, as far as the roadmap, I do want to note that we do not support delete. That's not for a security or any other reason. This is simply a prioritization decision. Our developers have told us that they want to see more of this other stuff before they need delete. So we will get to delete someday, but it's not coming in the near term, and just keep that in mind as you're designing and building your apps. And if you want more info, please take a shot of that. There's tons of stuff out there for documentation, blog posts written by some of us at Salesforce and written by the community. And new as of Friday is a Trailhead module for the Apex Metadata API. Please check that out. And if you happen to be one of the developers that was holding back on using custom metadata types because you couldn't write to them, we've solved that problem. And if you haven't checked out custom metadata types yet, please do that. And there's a Trailhead for that as well. Thank you very much, and we're going to have to get off the stage, but Avram and I will be around here for a while afterwards. Thanks for coming, and enjoy the rest of Dreamforce.
Everybody.
Hello, welcome. Can you hear me well? It's too loud. Today we are going to talk about empower your mobile app with Einstein Analytics. And I'm Shaki Krishnamurthy. I'm the Director of Consulting Services at Appirio. I manage the integration and BI team at Appirio. I have around 22 years of experience, of which 8 years as a Salesforce integration architect. Appirio is a Salesforce strategic partner, implementation consulting partner, and we are the Titanium sponsors at Dreamforce this year, focused very much on customer and worker experience. We are also implementation partners for Google, Workday, Cornerstone On Demand, and Amazon. And I have with me here Dave Dixon. You want to introduce yourself?
Hello. So I'm Dave Dixon. I work with Shaki at Appirio and manage one of our integration and analytics practices. Have about 20 years IT experience, 8 in Salesforce, a decade or so in business intelligence and data architecture. I'm also a co-product champion of Einstein Analytics with Shaki at Appirio. And full disclosure, I am not a mobile developer, although I work with a very talented team of mobile developers in our digital studio team at Appirio. But I am an Einstein Analytics expert, so we'll be able to share a little bit of what we've learned with you today.
Without further delay, the next 15 minutes we want to talk to you about, give a quick overview of Einstein Analytics and Mobile SDK. And then do share with you a business use case of one of our clients, the challenges they faced, the solution that Appirio built out, which was a mobile app using Salesforce Mobile SDK, and then enable the Einstein Analytics dashboards using the REST API. And we'll be closing it out with a brief demo of the feature related to that. How many of you are familiar with Einstein Analytics? So it was formerly known as Wave, and rebranded, renamed as Einstein Analytics from summer 17 release this year. And some key features to highlight here. It's native to Salesforce, you all know that. Has the 3 releases, secure, with always the latest versions available. It's mobile ready, which means you have access to your data anytime, anywhere, with rich visualization. And it's also Einstein AI powered, with the Einstein Data Discovery, which is added as an add-on product to Einstein Analytics. You can perform what-if analysis based on machine learning. And it includes a predictive analytics to it. And it's also intelligence embedded in your CRM system. It comes with actionable analytics. What I mean by that is you can take actions right from your data dashboards. Like if you're on an account or opportunity, you want to log a task or a call or do any custom actions, you can do it right there from your dashboard. You can also embed your dashboards within your page layouts and chatter and collaborate or post or share from your platform itself. And last but not the least, the platform comes with some pre-canned dashboards that involves your Sales Cloud data, Sales Analytics, Service Analytics dashboards, and plus you can build your own if needed. Next, let's quickly talk about the Salesforce Mobile SDK. It is a tool that it gives developers to build rich mobile app and connect to your Salesforce data from that app. One key feature is it's an open source suite of technologies which enables rapid building of HTML5, native, and hybrid mobile applications by connecting to Salesforce. And also, it comes with the security and other features that was originally available in Salesforce 1 platform. And you can also distribute the mobile app that you have built in Apple Store or Google Play Store because it supports iOS and Android. The mobile SDK comes with a modular architecture, and it provides certain features and services which were very clean. Most of this that I'm going to talk about, we ended up using it, and we built out this app for the client. One of which is the enterprise identity and security. It supports a SAML and any advanced authentication flows. So wherein the administrator have full access and control over who gets to see what data. The Smart Store encrypted database enables you to store or retrieve data from your local, and Smart Sync data synchronization gives you the API to synchronize data from offline database to Salesforce. And it also comes with a lot of mobile services like geolocation and push notification, analytics, and collaboration. Deep linking is a key feature that we used for this client because they were struggling with this issue. So deep linking is a feature where you would be able to move from one application to another application. And we will see that in the demo, how we have done it. So let's talk about what Appirio built for this health and life science company to improve their sales performance and team efficiency. The business need that this health and life science company had was they needed access to their data insight anytime, anywhere. They wanted to access their data offline, and they also wanted embedded analytics. And for their international sales team, they wanted to provide an iPad solution which would have rich dashboards, context-aware kind of dashboards, which will help them look up the partner doctor network and also track the performance of the doctors and also their sales team. But the challenge was data was all over the place. Offline data access was a need that they had, and passing state from mobile application to Einstein Analytics for the context-aware dashboard was pretty difficult. Because it was not an out-of-box functionality available at that time, and Appirio ended up building a solution for it. So the result is a native iPad app with using all the mobile services that I talked about, like the push notification, geo notification to track the doctors, deep linking feature, wherein from the mobile custom app, they can move to the Einstein Analytics dashboard. And then we built rich collection of analytics dashboard. And data was also cached so that when they were off network, they were able to access their information and the dashboards. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Dave to talk about the architecture behind it and kick it off with a demo.
Great, thank you, Shaki. So the architecture is pretty straightforward. As Shaki had mentioned, one of the things that we needed was the ability to access information offline. And that's part of the reason we decided to go with a native app. So the data actually is read up initially. We cache that data. We make that data available inside the app, and we can read and write it back from Salesforce. We can do that in an offline mode, store that up if we need to. But when we are online, the client really wanted that rich analytics capability that comes with Einstein Analytics. And so when they're online, they wanted to be able to move from a dashboard, move from the app, looking at a specific doctor, and then go into a dashboard and maybe see that dashboard, the initial state of that dashboard, filtered for that doctor that they were on in the app. They wanted that context to get passed from the mobile app, the native app, into Einstein Analytics. So the code to do this is fairly straightforward. I'm not a mobile developer, as I had mentioned, but I wanted to share this with you to talk about this URL string. One of the things you'll notice in this URL string is we pass in the dashboard identifier as well as our login credentials. And so that allows us to fire up the specific dashboard from the native app. But there's only one problem. If you remember, Shaki was talking about the fact our clients wanted this deep linking. And I just mentioned the fact that we want it to be context aware. When we go into the Einstein Analytics dashboard, we wanted to know what records you were on when you were looking in the app. And when we were working on this problem this summer, that wasn't supported out of the box. So there wasn't a way to do this. So we gave it some thought, started looking at sort of what tools we had available to us, and we came up with what we felt was a novel solution, and originally is what we were going to present here today. So what we did is we basically wrote those parameters to a custom object in Salesforce along with the user ID. And then we would launch our Einstein Analytics dashboard. And in Einstein Analytics, it knows and has access to what the user ID is because you're authenticated. And we can use what's called a Socko Step. So a Socko Step allows us to just write a Socko query against our Salesforce instance, pull the data down in real time, as opposed to out of a batch data set that might be a couple hours old. And we could use that Socko Step to create the filter for our dashboard and to filter our dashboard. Now, one of the fantastic things about Salesforce is they are constantly improving their product. And so as of the winter release, they've actually given us the ability to do this all in the URL string. We can just build out the dashboard state with JSON in the URL string. I'm going to show you about that. And you don't have to do all those steps that we just mentioned, but we wanted to share them with you because we think it's important that you know about those Socko steps and sort of different ways that you could accomplish this as well. So let's take a look at a demo here. Who here is familiar with JSON? JSON? All right. A few folks. All right. All right. Perfect. It's showing up there. So what we've got here is basically some JSON that we're going to pass as part of our URL string. And this first piece here, the URL string components, I sort of formatted that so that it would be readable. If you take a look here, you can see that we're passing in what our data set is and the data set value. So we're using a data set called the DF 2017 demo in this instance. We pass in what our field is. Our field is name. And what our selection is. So gene therapy. He's a doctor in our Imaginal org here. So that's what we're going to be passing in as part of the JSON state. As you can see, before that, we pass in the actual SF Analytics string, the dashboard, the org ID, login ID, all that stuff that you saw before. But now we've got this additional element called the dashboard state. I don't know if that was us or not. What we do is we then remove this extra spaces out of that, and that's that next piece down here, this URL string before encoding. And basically, we remove the spaces out of that, and then we encode the string. So you get rid of your spaces, you put your %20s in there. You guys have probably played with URL encoders and decoders. They're out there on the web for free, and then obviously, if you're building in your app, you can do this as well as part of your calls. So what this allows us to do is pass in that gene therapy name, that doctor name, into the dashboard when we fire up the dashboard from the mobile app. So let's walk through that a little bit. So we have our mobile app here, got my data set. Just checking to make sure we're online still, so we are. And when we open up this mobile app, you'll notice, or this mobile dashboard for the doctors, that we don't have a doctor's name set here. When you come in by default, there's no doctor selected. We could select a specific doctor, and then the dashboard's going to filter for that. So let's say I select Sean, and now I get my key performance indicators up at the top, my line charts, they're all filtered for Sean. But imagine, if you will, that we are in our app, we've navigated to a specific doctor, we've gone to gene therapy, just as we've seen in the JSON that we were taking a look at. And what I've got here is I've actually already copied that URL string that has that encoded state in it, just for brevity. And I'm going to hit go here. And now it will fire up our dashboard. And you'll notice now that we don't see the additional information. We only see the information for gene as selected, because we passed that JSON filter state into our dashboard when we made that call. So what did we learn through this process? What were some takeaways as we did this mobile development with this app that had both offline and online capabilities? What did we learn out of all of it? Well, one of the things we learned is that real-time queries with Socko query steps are really cool. Now, I didn't actually demo that here because the new solution makes it so we didn't have to use it to solve our problem. But if you need to show real-time data in your dashboard from Salesforce, check out the Socko query steps. Additionally, there is a broad suite of Salesforce tools. There is many ways to solve a problem. And so if you're willing to think outside the box a little bit, even if something isn't supported as a default offering, you can create solutions with the many tools that the Salesforce tool set has provided you to really solve almost any problem. Another thing we noticed is, as we were developing these dashboards, we initially started developing the dashboards in the desktop version first, because in some cases they were going to be used in the desktop version. And then we created the mobile layouts. And really, if you're building mobile layouts and that's your primary use case, just start with the mobile layouts, right? So begin with the end in mind, and design with the mobile layouts first. And this next one probably has bit more than one person in this audience. Trust but verify. We had some initial formulas that were given to us, and as we dug further and met with some more technical resources, some of those formulas weren't correct, and we had to modify how we were doing some of our calculations. And then finally, data sets, architect over evolve. A lot of times when you're doing Einstein analytics development, you build a data set to support a specific dashboard, and it works great. And then the next request comes along, and you're like, I've got 80% of what I need in my data set. I'm just going to add some additional fields in here and add on to it. And you rinse, lather, repeat. You do that 3 or 4 times. And what you might end up with is doing some really complicated calculations in your dashboards that you could have done in your data set if you had organized the data set appropriately and architected it for those specific in-use cases. So if you find yourself doing that, take a step back, re-architect your data set, build a new one if you need to, so that you're able to support your dashboard needs. And then the most important thing out of all this is Salesforce is a rapidly evolving platform. It continues to improve every single release. So just as our problem that we initially had got solved in this most recent winter release, oftentimes there's better ways to do things as new releases come out. So read those release notes and stay on top of it and learn about these new features, because there might be a better way to solve the problem than the way you solved it yesterday.
I think with that we have 2.5, 3 minutes. We can take some questions. We want to leave you with some resources. Check out the Trailhead module and also the winter release that talks about most of these features available for you.
Any questions from the audience? Yeah, yes, sir. Hey, let me come down. Yeah. Right. You can do it two ways. So one would be you would
Dave,
pass.
could you repeat the question?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Good. Thank you. What's your name, sir? Mike asked if the dashboard is using more than one data set, can you pass those filters in for more than one data set? And the answer is yes, you can. It's just a little bit of additional JSON. Another way you can do it is you can link those data sets basically on whatever fields you're passing it in. So when it filters for one, it'll filter for the other as well. Either way. Yep. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Right.
Is that similar to having like an array or JSON that you're passing into
Yeah, that's right. And so basically, the multiple filters, that's the way it is. It'll just be another piece of JSON. Basically, you'll have an array of values is the way you'll do it. That's absolutely right. And there's a, did we put the document up here? There is a document that describes how to do this as well, and so you can Google for it. And I don't think we put it as a resource list that explains it. But if you go and look at the winter release notes, I believe it's actually associated with that for how to do it. Thank you.
All right, we'll be around for a few minutes if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I hope you have a great Dreamforce.